All right, so well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining today's BGSU Doctoral Program and Organizational Development and Change Symposia. We're delighted to welcome Matt Minahan to the group today to talk about the future of OD and the work that he's been doing around that. So, as you know, this community of change leaders is coming together monthly to support our program, as well as to learn together. So we're excited to have Matt join us today and talk about all the great work that he's been doing. And without further ado, Matt, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks, Doug. Thanks to the Bowling Green community of scholars. I am thrilled to be invited and very happy to share with you some of the story around the OD gathering and how it came about and what we came up with. It would just be helpful to me and maybe to everyone, just each of you to say something about who you are and maybe a question that you might have that you hope today's session gets answered. And just to expedite things, I'll just call on people in the order that I see you on my screen, okay? So I'll start with Francis and then Dave Harkins. Francis.
And I am asking who I am and what I might be interested in today?
Yes.
So I am an OD elder. And so my interest here is that I've been doing co-teaching at Bowling Green, and these are all my friends here. We are learning some things together. You know, and looking at developing the field, one of the things I'm becoming aware of, we talk about developing the field, we talk about developing organizations, and I realize that at the core of it, and you know, I always go here, Matt, is how are we developing ourselves? Because, you know, and I always sort of tease about being an elder, but the thing I realize is the world around me is changing. So how do I be relevant and still hold to my core values? So I'll be looking at what kind of personal development, personal professional development we are looking at. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Francis. David, and then David Harkins and David Perry.
I'm David Harkins. I am a second year, almost third year doctoral student at Bowling Green State University. I'm an independent consultant and I do a lot of work with strategic change with primarily nonprofit organizations, but also others. And, you know, I didn't even realize organization development and change existed until about 3 years ago, although I've been doing this work my whole career. So what I'm interested in learning more about is as we move into this next 25 or 30 years, how can we make what we know more relevant and more integrated into the communities and the companies and the organizations in the world so that other people don't end up where I was and not even know we existed.
Great, thanks. David Perry, then Yasmin.
Thank you, Matt. I am a lifelong friend of David Harkins, and he's the one that got me into this. I was looking to become a coach. I'm a marketing consultant, and I have found that most of my clients need more support in figuring out their organizations when they do marketing. So I began to look for a formal program through which to learn frameworks and tools that allow me to help them more in being greater contributors to their organization. And counseled with David, and he suggested BGSU, and I've had the pleasure of meeting Carol and Brandon and Yasmin and Tom and others, and I'm very excited. I'm starting the third cohort. I may be the junior person, not by age, but by academically here. We start in August and we'll be the third cohort of the DODC program. So I just really hope to learn at this stage a bit more about the landscape and where my role may be in it. So thank you for being here today. I look forward to the information sharing.
Thanks, David. Yasmin and Carol.
Hi, Matt. Hi, all. So I am part of a wonderful community of OD practitioners and kind of on my next edge in terms of a scholar and evidence-based approaches. So, you know, part of this new OD community that has been kind of huge in terms of my own learning and growth. I'm also a mentee of both Francis and Matt, and have had some of the greatest kind of learning moments being part of the OD network with both of them, and also Carol through the work of Collaborative Change Library. So I'm just super excited. My question really is, especially as I kind of supported the OD gathering and the insights that came out of it, how might we as a community of doctoral students engage and enroll and take that to action? So that's kind of the question I'm holding.
Great. Thanks, Yasmin. Carol, then Tisha.
So I have no idea what to say. I relate to Francis's elder and love the picture of Elderella that I wouldn't have vocalized, but Yasmin gives me the privilege, and that's a Francis term, and I am entering that world with enormous joy. I see myself as the glue between organizational learning and OD. I feel much less an OD practitioner, though like David Harkins did it my whole life, but very much an OL person. And I think you all know, but I'm going to tell Matt, I committed to following the first cohort since its inception to the end to do an ethnographic study, because I'm so interested in how cohorts become learning community. And what the rest of you don't know is that Matt and I graduated from the same program where we got our title doctor, but Matt was in the very first cohort. So I want to learn from Matt what has been learned in the last 30 years. I think it was 30 years ago, right? Or 25 years ago.
94 is when we graduated.
And I
So we're
started
coming up on 30.
So what's the difference starting a new doctoral program for practitioners 30 years ago to now is a very interesting thing for me to understand. But I think at the bottom line of all this is I'm really interested how this group moves from the title scholar practitioner, which is what the historical view was, to practitioner scholar. And I believe that's what the OD gathering, which I was privileged to be part of and worked on the values team, is really all about. So I think we're in the right place and I'm very excited.
Great. Thanks, Carol. Tisha, and then Thomas Mitchell.
Hi, Matt. Nice to meet you. My name is Tisha Duncan. I work in the field of L&D right now. And so I'm curious about how the field of OD&C will continue to evolve going forward, as well as what are some additional tools and frameworks OD practitioners need to remain relevant and to help organizations as they transform.
Great, thanks, Tisha. Thomas Mitchell, then Tom Daniels.
Sure, thank you. Hi, Dr. Minahan. Looking forward to hearing from you, certainly your perspective over a near 30-year period, which is amazing. And I'm in Knoxville, Tennessee. I'm part of cohort 2 with David Harkins, who I know, and he usually leaves his shirt untucked so I can grab onto it. So, but looking forward to the presentation today, and just can't wait to hear some of the changes and perspectives as we move forward. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Tom Daniels and Brandon Rogers. Nope, okay, fine. Brandon and then Daisy.
Hey, Dr. Minahan. Once again, thank you for being here with us. I'm a part of cohort 1, and I am a budding management consultant, OD through and through, specifically change management, well, which is kind of compartmentalized from OD, but nonetheless. So I noticed that you had a publication out there about global OD competency, and that's what I'm really, really interested in, because the field of OD benefits greatly from having a framework that properly represents our positioning. So I was really interested in hearing your thoughts and seeing how we can contribute as a budding OD practitioners.
Great. Thanks, Brandon. Daisy, and then Matt Maluchnik.
Hi, Dr. Minahan. My name is Daisy. I am a member of Cohort 1 and I work with BGSU. I come from a programming and analytical background. I've always wondered what I'm doing here, but it's beginning to make sense now. My question though is on the effectiveness of self-awareness for the OD practitioner in all of the roles that they are playing in. So I want to see how self-awareness, what's its effect in all of their roles, right? They have so many roles, and I want to better understand how does self-effectiveness or self-awareness help them in their roles as OD practitioners. And we were introduced to a new concept over the weekend, which is contextual intelligence. And I'm also interested in how that plays out in an OD practitioner's life as they, meander through all the roles as a coach, as an organizational developer, as all the roles that they play. How does that come into play?
Great, thanks, Daisy. Matt, and then phone caller from area code 419.
Hi, this is Matt. I am new to the program, actually just started in cohort 3. I'm looking to learn as much as possible. Right now, my wife and I own and run a couple childcare centers, so we're in the early childhood field. So whatever I can learn and take it back to our business, and I'm very passionate about helping other business owners as well. So is there anything I could take back to our field and just make it better? We need a lot of support for our children, for our future. We're very much a family business, and our vision, our mission for our family is to help other families. And that's what we're going to do. And I'm hoping this program will help me just be better at that. So
great. Thanks, Matt. Phone caller from area code 419. If you're trying to talk, you're still on mute. And in the meantime, both Heather and Tom Daniels suggested that they're in noisy locations and this would not be a good time to introduce themselves. So area code 419, if you do get off mute, just speak up and we'll include you into the conversation. For the time being, let me just say I'm a small company, been in practice for 27 years, was internal at the World Bank, started the OD function there back in the prehistoric times. Been involved in the OD network for most of my 40 years in the field, and doing this project, The Gathering, was really a real career highlight for me over the course of all of these years and all of these experiences. I provided to Doug a copy of this presentation, and if you're interested, I'm sure Doug can provide it to you. It's occurring to me, Doug, I did not invite you to introduce yourself, so please do.
Oh, sure. Thank you very much. So yeah, Doug Bella, and I am a second in the cohort 2, just finishing up my first year of the program. I did take a short pause in there. I started with cohort 1 and then rejoined in cohort 2. And I'm new to the field of OD. I would say there's certain practices and principles that I've used throughout my leadership career, and the program has really helped pull that together. And where I'm interested is just seeing how I can be a part of shaping what OD in the field looks like in the future. So that's where my question is.
Very cool. All right, thanks, Doug. So I'm going to share this presentation. I'm not going to spend all day on all of these slides because there's much more context here than we have time for. And it's frankly in the slides that you'll get, and they tell a lot of the story. So the event was called From the Founders to the Future. So right there, you kind of have a sense of what we were trying to do. We were trying to kind of take the knowledge and the wisdom and the ethics and the values of the founders of our field and get them propelled into the future for those taking the field into the future. We called it a gathering to build OD for tomorrow's world. It's been published now. That's a cover of it. If you don't have a copy, let me know. I'm very happy to provide you one, and you may have gotten one from Steve or elsewhere in the Bowling Green universe. Several of us were complaining and moaning about the fact that we weren't having long-form conversations about the field and missing the deep relationships that happen over long-term, high-quality conversations, and that we really didn't see the field ready to address automation and climate and diversity, and that another generation of OD leaders was stepping aside, and that we just didn't have a way to make sure that the knowledge and the wisdom of the founders, which many of us had the privilege of being present for, was going to be lost as a new generation of leaders takes over the field. And so we really felt like this was, we felt compelled to kind of create this bridge between those of us who knew Charlie and Edie Seashore and David Bradford and Ken Benny and all the founders of our field into this new generation, which now includes you all. So, and then the other thing we were all noticing is that, with coaching and diversity practitioners and team builders and strategic planners and all the different disciplines in our field, we were feeling that the field was kind of fragmenting into specializations. And so that was another goal we wanted to meet. And the other question we asked is just why not do this? So this was a collection of over almost 300 people. We had 3 face-to-face gatherings in the first week in December of 2018, 2017, 2018, 2019. We did this by invitation only. We wanted to really manage intentionally who was there in terms of to make sure we had an intensely diverse mix on race and gender and age and experience and discipline. We didn't want to leave it to chance about who would inform whom and how the word might get out. So our goal was to build common ground around who we are, what we do, and what the world needs from us now and in the future. We met in Baltimore, Maryland, December's 2017, 18, and 2019. So our sample was stratified. We wanted to intentionally mix on disciplines, on roles, internals, externals. We wanted to make sure we had a good sampling of authors, consultants, academics. That's why Carol was there, and Steve came, and we had a couple of other folks from Bowling Green, other universities as well. We wanted to make sure we had a good mix of ages and genders and gender identities, nationalities. We had people from Africa, Europe, Asia, North America, largely US, but still nonetheless, we were intentional about inviting people from other areas of the world as well. So we had a small convening group, Fred Miller, Judith Katz, Bob Marshak, Bridget O'Brien, Eileen Wasserman, Norm Jones, and myself. And then Yasmin was among several other people who really were hugely helpful in executing these 3 years, including Karen Parker Thompson, Keith Early, Sandra Janoff, and Alicia Simmons. And while I'm at it, I just want to send out a huge thank you to Yasmin and the Clearing. When you see the beautiful document, it is their desktop publishing function. I'm sure Yasmin and the Clearing have a more contemporary name for what they do here, but they turned some straight Word documents into this beautiful document that you've seen here, and that was courtesy of the Clearing, and we're very grateful for Yasmin volunteering the Clearing's help and for the Clearing's graphics department for making this happen. So our central organizing question was, what world do we want to create, and what's the future of OD in that world? We were very intentional about kind of framing it this way because we wanted to make sure we were externally oriented. We didn't want to get kind of trapped in the past of OD where we're always focused on ourselves and focused internally. So what world do we want to create? What's the outside world going to be like, and how do we want to influence it? And then what future does OD have in that world? Coming out of the second gathering, we created 4 circles of work to work on 6 different topics, and I'll go through the output of each of these 6 different areas now. So this was the language we came up with on OD's vision. In an ever-changing, increasingly complex and diverse world, all organizations, communities, and individuals are adaptable, resilient, and thriving. So we could just stop there. I'd be thrilled if we just stopped there, okay? Individuals, communities, organizations are adaptable, resilient, and thriving. People create and lead healthy, meaningful lives through sustainable human and organizational systems. Leaders boldly and intentionally foster inclusive environments in which people connect with one another and see themselves and their organizations in new ways and co-create their shared future. So this was kind of the marker that we set out there as the vision we see for OD and for the world. And the next slides will kind of talk through some of what will be involved in supporting that. Let me pause here and just invite a couple of comments in response to what you're seeing here, and then we'll continue after that. Actually, let me leave it up so you can see it, and just share. What are your thoughts here? What's your response? Does this make sense to you? Silly?
So I put a note in the, am I open? I put a note in the chat, Matt, that, you know, that's a masterpiece when you look at it. It's all inclusive, it's bold, and I think it does speak to what the elders that I knew, or the founders that I knew, wanted for the world. And, you know, this stands in spite of how the world, in light of maybe how the world around us may change, that this would be a never dying kind of vision. This vision doesn't need to change going forward, no matter what happens in the world, is what I'm trying to say. I like it.
Thank you, Francis. Others?
I really like how broad it is with regard to organizations, communities, and individuals. I mean, so much of these early conversations, early learnings we've had about OD, at least through the doctoral program, is all organization and corporately focused. And it's, at least from my perspective, I think this is an issue outside of the organizations as well. It's within our communities and governments and other things that we need to work through. So I love this vision for that purpose.
Yeah, Brendan, go ahead.
If I could build on what David was saying, I agree. I really like the holistic nature of what this vision statement encompasses, because so many times within organizations, OD is just viewed as such a tactical, superficial, oh yes, just training. And it's so much more than that. It's about human systems, thriving human systems, right? And I just think that this is a much more powerful, evocative statement that that broadens the view of what OD is.
Good. Thanks, Brandon. So I just want to circle back to what Daisy was talking about in your check-in. Daisy, you were talking about kind of what does this mean for people? What does this mean for individuals? And Carol, you talked about the learning aspect of this. we were very intentional in creating this statement to make sure that it reflected both the needs of organizations, communities, and individuals. And the three words that we really wrestled with a lot, the group that worked on this, were adaptable, resilient, and thriving. And so as we think about our learning and development and personal development needs as we take our lives forward, being adaptable, resilient, and thriving, we think are really central to what communities and organizations and individuals need to be in order to lead healthy, meaningful lives and engage in sustainable human and organizational systems. So let me move on to, listen, I'm not tracking the chat box, and would appreciate it if one of you would just track it for me and let me know what any comments that need to be injected here that I'm not catching, okay?
Yep, absolutely, Matt. I have got that covered.
Great, thank you very much. So the next we wanted to talk about was the definition of OD. We started with like 37 different definitions from textbooks, and another 13 or 14 people in the room added additional definitions. So the definitions group had like 50 some odd definitions that they started with. And first just began by trying to decide what is a definition, how is it structured, what are the elements of a definition, and what would it be used for? So after struggling with that and then trying to parse through 51 different definitions, this was the product, the consensus product that emerged. And that is, OD refers to the disciplinary field of scholars and practitioners who work collaboratively with organizations and communities. So we could stop right there, okay? We could say it's the field of scholars and practitioners who work collaboratively with organizations and communities. So then you ask why, okay, fine. To develop their system-wide capacity for effectiveness and vitality. So that's what I think is kind of the core of this definition. It's really different from what you'll read in the Beckard definition. You know, a planned change driven from the top, effective methodologies, really different from most of the definitions you read in other places. But, a disciplinary field of scholars and practitioners who work collaboratively with organizations and communities to develop their system-wide capacity for effectiveness and vitality, grounded in the organizational and social science. So what are your thoughts and comments on this?
So I just have a question. What jumped out at me when I read organization development refers to a field of scholars and practitioners. And so it puts the ownership, the onus of this field on the scholars and practitioners. When in my work, one of the things I wanted was for the leaders, especially the leaders, but people in the organizations, to absorb the practice of OD themselves. And so it just raises that question, how do we not have it be, the field be the scholars and practitioners, but that it would be a practice that's run by the scholars and practitioners, but also we are trying to build into the client system. So it's just a little twist there on how that might be expressed, because I'm sure, you know, intentionally it's in there.
Right, so we really wrestled with this and decided that the kind of OD accepted definition of practitioners is not what we meant here. When we were talking about practitioners, we were talking about everyone who is doing OD in all of their jobs. And so we weren't just meaning here, you know, scholar/practitioners as we in the field have come to talk about them. But we were talking about anyone who practices any OD role or any OD function in any way. So it's not just the herd. It's not just kind of the, you know, the anointed few here who have the badge or have the credential or go to the meetings or join the organization. We were talking about leaders, we were talking about coaches, we were talking about anyone in the line, out of the line, in staff functions, who work collaboratively in organizations and communities. So we probably should have looked for some different language on that, Francis, but our intention was to be as broad as you've suggested.
And Matt,
Hey,
there is a
Matt.
question in the chat too.
Please.
It's just as a new arrival to OD, this is a definition that engages me. I was expecting design to be included though, perhaps develop encompasses it. And then Carol adds on to that. Design thinking is a fundamental, but is relatively new. Develop is growth for me, learning as opposed to a process, traditionally training and development. So just, I think there's just creating a distinction between design and develop is in the definition is the question.
Yeah. I don't recall, I wasn't part of all of the meetings of the definitions group, and I don't recall how design featured in those conversations. And as I recall, design was in an earlier draft. So I'm not sure what the conversation was that it did not include it. But yeah, I'm an org design guy. I'm a strategy structure guy. And I'd be quite happy to have design in here. It's not. So I'm still committed to the definition, particularly committed to the process that developed the definition and the 15 or 20 people in that circle of work who worked on it.
Matt,
go ahead, Carol.
I need to clarify how this evolved, because I put something in the chat that said Nexus and CCL have a commitment to transforming organizations, revitalizing communities, and developing human potential. And to me, that's integrated in the gathering. But I don't want the group to mix what you're talking about and where I was coming from. And I think that's where David's response was, to develop, but I want to clarify that. So you are under no obligation to respond to that. It was me who initiated it.
I appreciate that, Carol. Thank you. And as I said, you know, I'm an org design guy, and I'd be happy with it in here. And listen, as I read, you know, as you read what you've written in there, you know, that language is very evocative to me, and it's very inspirational to me. And I could sign up to everything that you've said from CCL and from Nexus for Change, because I think we're all doing great work in all of those areas.
Matt, can
Yeah.
I actually, to your point about the group, I wasn't part of the group, but I was there in terms of the breakouts, and Yabom Gilpin-Jackson kind of led the group. They did, just from a process perspective, they did a massive lit review of all the OD definitions. And to me, that out of all the conversation was the toughest.
Yes.
And the word DESA, yeah. And has it's been in terms of our community, even just trying to define it. But the word collaborative design was part of that. And so it was kind of replaced in this more macro word of collaboratively. So that's where kind of the design elements kind of fit in. So I just wanted to give some of that context.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So we could spend the rest of the hour, we can spend the rest of the day, the rest of the week, we could spend the rest of your doctoral programs exploring and debating the definition of OD. What gives this legitimacy for me is the process of getting to it. And that is 275, 280 people in conversation over 3 years, and a designed and facilitated process of converging that brought us to this. And so while I really like Richard Beckard's. I really like my own. I like Chris Worley's. I like, there are lots of good definitions out there. I like Mayon Chung Judge's, but none of them benefits from the development process that this benefits from. And so for me, that gives this a level of legitimacy and why I'm willing to sign on and commit to it. I'm going to suggest we move on so we have time for the other topics as well. So we had a group that was really thinking about, so what does OD really, what is OD about? What does it mean? And their why here was language I'd never seen before. And when I saw it, it lit me up. So why do we do this work? To elevate humanity. And for me, it was that stark and that simple. And I think almost everyone I've spoken with says, oh my goodness, the light bulb has gone on. So what is it that we do? I also really like what they come up with here, because it really touches on use of self, to provide a presence to human systems, to function, grow, adapt, thrive, collaborate, unlock creativity, and work sustainably. We provide a presence to human systems. We don't fix them. We don't tell them what to do. We don't stand and facilitate them. We don't give them guidance. We don't benchmark them. We don't do any of those things. We provide a presence to human systems. And for me, that was the most fundamental and the most basic thing that captures all of the things that we do in the various realms of our work. We do it by acting in service of the systems that we support, elevating the human element, bringing intentionality, navigating complexity, using our full selves, building partnerships, advocating for diversity, inclusion, fairness, and justice. And they had some more language there, but I stopped there. So what are your reactions to this? Are yours as positive as mine, or do you see any shortcomings in here we ought to discuss?
I really like the why aspect of that, particularly as it relates to the what, because, just to make sure the voices are heard and to reflect things within the systems that we see.
Thank you. Others?
I really appreciate oh, sorry. Go ahead, Thomas.
Oh, sure. Thank you, Douglas. I like the fact that you're initiating and staying ahead instead of trying to fix a problem or saying something went wrong. Now management needs to collect it in order to manage it. If you can't measure, you can't manage. It's kind of an act, and I like that you're moving forward and trying to avoid some of those pitfalls.
Mm-hmm. Good, thank you.
And that's really where I was going to go as well, is just moving away from this thought process that we have to measure every element of an organization, and how do we, which has the tendency to squash creativity because we work to a metric, and then being that to provide presence to human systems. I mean, that's just so powerful to me, to really elevate and lift up beyond what we're looking at from a key performance indicator. So just that really resonates.
Yeah. I really like it because, I acknowledge that I think you did a good job on the definition, because the language is just really hard. And it does call for discussion. You can't ever look at the language and know. But if I looked at your definition, say, how do I do that, and look at this, it would be total. If I look at the definition, so how would I do that? This tells me how I could humanly do this. I would know what to do. So I like that.
That's great, Francis. Thank you.
Hey, Matt, I wanted your thoughts on kind of looking ahead to the future. So this idea of navigating change, looking ahead for organization and leaders, I often get clients saying, help me figure out what's ahead, because there's a lot of risk and rewards, there's unforeseen. And I think OD may be able to take that mantle a bit and be the ones that advise leaders and individuals on not only their organization's path, but perhaps their career decision-making, their personal growth, and just wanted your thoughts on that. Maybe two a bit too broad, but
No, I actually two thoughts on that. My first thought, just back to the metrics question. One of the shortcomings of our field, I believe, has been we've never been able to make the financial argument for why it's worth investing in what we do. And so this doesn't, I don't believe metrics and counting things are in the essence of OD, but it's also an area where I think we have underfunctioned as a field. And too many people come to our field being not financially literate and therefore not able to make the financial case for why you need to do a $750,000 intervention, an OD intervention that's going to take 8 months to do, or a $75,000 intervention that's going to take 3 months to do. So I wanted to kind of touch on that from an earlier comment about metrics. I think the field is way deficient in that regard, and we need to be better at it as practitioners, and hopefully you as scholars will be curious about those kinds of things as well. To your point, David, I think our role here, regarding the future, I think our role here is to provide tools and methods and a process for allowing the client system to find its own future, for allowing the client system to gather around key questions. And so we provide them frameworks for having meetings and frameworks for benchmarking and questionnaires and ways that they can go collect data about their future and support them in the meeting patterns that are going to help them create their own future. I think to combine the two answers, the better we know the organization, the better we know how it operates, the better we know its income dynamics, the better we know its financial environment and its regulatory environment, the better we are able then to help the system create and discover its own future. So hopefully that gets to what you're talking to, David.
It does. Thank you.
Yep. Anything else on Essence? Anybody else?
Yeah, Dr. Minahan, I just wanted to say that this is really speaking to me because the what, which is we provide a presence to human systems, right? Still speaks to that self-awareness. It starts, with you, and then it goes to the other, right? So I'm loving the way this is going. I don't think I started off knowing all of this about OD when I started in this program, but I'm really, really loving this because that self-awareness, that knowing yourself. I came into the program to change organizations, but instead, I'm,
exactly right.
I am learning who I am, which is really, really great. So thank you. This is good.
Daisy, you are in very good company. I would say just about all of us came here to fix something else, only to find out that it was us that needed fixing as well. So let me move on to the next one, and that is OD values. This is another, everybody has a list of values. Rothwell and Sullivan have 153 in one of their textbooks, and everybody has something. For me, what validates this list of values, again, was the process by which it was developed. 3 researchers here, Hyung-Jun Yoon, Sasha Farley, and Cesar Padilla, conducted Delphi methodology over, I think 65 people over 3 rounds over like almost a year. And by using the structured Delphi methodology and quantitative evaluation of the results, these were the values that they came up with. And so it began, as the text says, as a brainstorm, unfiltered list, but it didn't have any discipline to it. And so they organized and shared the results in 3 Delphi rounds, coming up with these 9 values. So I'm going to start at the top and work the outside ring, then I'll work the inside ring. And the document, by the way, has further definitions and explanations of all 9 of these values, but I just want to name them in our session today. So collaborative engagement. That is, we engage in a jointly held, jointly shared, joint responsibility, collaborative way. Trust and respect for each other and for the organization. Client growth and development, which gets to your passion, Carol. And strategic practicality. This was a real tough one. They really worked hard on the language here, but too many of our OD people are way down in the weeds and have no connection to strategy. Too many are way up in the clouds and have no connection to what's actually going on. And so the value here is to be strategic and realistic, strategic and practical at the same time, integrating the two ends of this polarity and living in the both and of strategy, being strategic and being practical. Diversity, of course, and they talked about, should they further define diversity in terms of race and age and gender and other variables, but just decided in the end that diversity was the critical value here. Awareness of self and systems. So this again comes back to use of self. It comes back to how I show up in the organization. Integrity, telling the truth, speaking truth to power. Continuous learning and innovation, and courageous leadership. So looking at the world as we saw it coming up, seeing the impact of artificial intelligence and automation, and giving thought to the next 25 years and the discontinuities in the environment. What are the values that would sustain the field through those areas of turbulence? And so these are the 9 values that we came up with. Thoughts, comments, questions? They're hard to argue with. And as I said, for me, what gives them legitimacy was the process by which they were developed. 65 scholar practitioners over 3 rounds in a Delphi process. And I look at these and I can't argue with any of them, and I can't imagine anything that's missing. So let me move on to the last one, which is the OD capabilities. So our group had a debate between competencies and capabilities. And since there already is a recently published set of OD competencies, which Brandon, you talked about in the global competency model, which I had the privilege to work on. This group oriented itself toward capabilities, which are broader, which are less quantitatively, specifically defined than a competency. And the 6 are being self-aware, the ability to maintain an enhanced reflective sense of self, and inclusion and equity across all settings and levels of systems at all times, and systems thinking and flexibility, and skillful intervention, being able to facilitate within and across organizations and community, and having a good grounding in theory and concepts and methods, and future focused, staying current in anticipation of new and emerging megatrends. So those were the 6 OD capabilities. And let me just share the last slide with you, and then we'll have a couple of minutes for conversation. So the OD imperative, just kind of putting this all together. Health and agility at all levels of systems. And we have to, it's imperative that we navigate the increasing speed of change, and that we live into our principles and values and culture, and maintain individual and group identity, fostering knowledge and learning and development, and supporting and promoting sustainability connecting with advances in technology and seeing this as a beginning, not an ending. If you haven't seen the document, it's available here. So what are your thoughts on these specifically or overall? We have about 3 or 4 more minutes before we have to close down.
For me, Matt, from a non-OD world, it just really helps create a much better vision and picture of where I'm moving towards. So thank you. And I think Tisha messaged me as well in the chat, and just as our first cohort is going into defining what the field of OD is, that this really helps bring some of these thoughts, you know, of the 2 years that we've been in classes together and gives us a better sense of direction of, you know, who we were, but where we're going. So thank you. It was just fantastic.
Yeah, I thank you as well, Dr. Minahan. Great presentation. And I think, again, as Doug spoke or said so well, is that there is variation in the understanding, the termination of applying OD, but again, a separation from change management. That there's more, and recognizing that it's an evolving field that has tremendous merit. So thank you.
Thanks very much.
Dr. Minahan.
Oops, Tisha, you were there, then you were gone.
I think I clicked, I was off mute and then I clicked mute. So I was saying that this was really, really great, like just over the last couple of months, as I've been thinking about like Doug mentioned, our exam that we have to take in the fall. And thinking about one of our questions is around the field of OD and C. And I kept thinking, how am I going to tackle this question? You know, what is this going to look like? What is my logic model my visual gonna look like? And so as I watched you and listened to you go through this, I just kept having all of these aha moments. Okay, like he's laying this out in a nice bow for us. And, you know, and now I got to think about like the past of OD and what that looked like and how it's changed over time. So this has been really great and helpful in helping me to frame how I need to think about not only about the field, but my role in the field, and also being able to, you know, clearly articulate my response to that question. So thank you.
Great. Thanks, Tisha.
And Dr. Minahan, I wholeheartedly agree with what Tisha said, and Thomas and Douglas for that matter, because, you know, it's making so many of the elements that we've learned across the past 2 years, it brings it all to focus. And it would have been, yes, you know, for us, it would have been a stronger message to have heard this from the beginning, but man, this is right on time.
Well, the document is like 2 weeks old. So it was still in the oven and wasn't ready to come out. It took us a long damn time to cook the thing, but it's finally out.
It was kismet.
Exactly right. So listen, I just want to thank you all for inviting me. I love being in the conversation with scholars, and so wish you so much good fortune going forward. What I really wish I had the chance to do is to ask each of you what your emerging research questions might be. But if I get invited back, we can have that conversation too. I'd love to hear what you're thinking about and kind of where, because you are the future of the field, and the research questions that are on your mind are what's going to take the field forward from the founders to the future. So I appreciate the invitation. I wish you all well. Thanks to Doug, to Steve. Say hi to Deb O'Neill if you see her around there. And good luck with your studies. It's great to see those of you I know, Francis and others. And I wish you well in the future.